Hey there, it's Amanda Dagley, and welcome to Me and You and Music, the online experience. I suppose I should first explain to you what Me and You and Music is all about if you're a first-time listener. Me and You and Music started out as an idea in the winter of 2017. The idea was born from frustration with my then radio job. Ultimately, that frustration led to me and a business partner creating our very own radio station, which I co-owned for about 6 years. After a year of radio station ownership, I finally felt comfortable to launch my very own show, Me and You and Music, the idea which had just been sitting in a notebook for the last several years. The concept of Me and You and Music is quite simple. It is a conversation about 5 songs of significance for the guest. Over the years, I've seen the show transform into different things. When the pandemic started and I couldn't have guests any longer, except for the occasional Zoom guest, the conversation became me talking about 5 songs of significance, which changed the whole concept of the show, but it really opened it up to different things. And I'm really glad that it was able to morph and grow, even in light of a very serious and scary situation. Because this show was originally aired on FM radio, I did have to abide by one very important rule. If you've been on the show, I would tell you it's 5 songs of significance and no cussin'. The beauty of this show now being online is that I can occasionally include a song that has cussin'. I don't want to actually go there quite a bit, but sometimes a well-placed swear word really gets the point across in a song. Me and You and Music has gone through many changes since its inception, and it's time for it to go through another. Perhaps I should just say it's a metamorphosis. Because the original shows contain songs that were played on the radio, thus, there were royalties paid on those songs. That means, because I don't have the licensing for those songs, I will need to edit out the original music, but keep the integrity of the conversation. To be able to have that same sort of interaction where you talk about the song and then you listen to it together and then you talk about it a bit more and you move on to the next song, since the songs have to be edited out of the program to make sure I don't violate any copyright infringement, I have provided a YouTube playlist of all of the songs that are featured in this show. If you DM me, I will send you a link to a personal Spotify playlist that features all of the songs that I originally had chosen for the show and all of the extra credit mentioned in this particular show. I even went ahead and updated with some extra songs that I didn't include in the original playlist, but you gotta DM me for that playlist, okay? Tonight's show is my ode to being a punk rock girl. This episode was recorded in March of 2023 in honor of Women's History Month. And since it's March of 2024, another Women's History Month, it felt like the right time to launch Me and You and Music online. Since the beginning of the show, people had asked me where they could listen to it online, and I never put it up anywhere because it just felt like it wasn't the right time. But now it is the right time. My goal for this is to not only put up my own personal archives of the show, but to create new shows in this different format. Thank you for sticking around for 5 years of Me and You and Music, and here's to many more years of the show to come. But I do hope you listen to the entire show because at the end, I'll have an update with some very funny audio of a 15-year-old me. A brief show note. I've added a 5-second musical interlude in case you want to pause the show and play the songs in between segments. Kind of like when we were given a sound that instructed us as kids to turn the page in our storybooks on tape. Enjoy the show. Hey, it's Amanda Dagley, and welcome to another Me and You and Music. March is Women's History Month, and in honor of that, I'd like to go back to my own history, music history that is, and present to you this evening a punk rock quilt, if you will. In my heart of hearts, I will forever be a punk rocker. And punk rock means a lot of different things to me, and it means a lot of different things from when I started out being a punk rocker when I was about 14 or 15. I got into punk rock music kind of gradually. I wanted to know more about the bands that I was currently listening to and what they were listening to. And because I started listening to a lot of heavy metal at a young age, a lot of those bands were inspired by punk. So I got into punk. And as I got into punk, I realized I liked a lot about the ethics behind it and the whole do-it-yourself and the kind of I'm a misfit, but I'm going to do it my way. And as a teenager in the 1990s, I sure did feel like a misfit. And I sort of synthesized punk rock in my own way, my own small town way, because although punk rock now is a lot more accessible, in the 90s it wasn't really, especially where I grew up. I mean, I grew up in a small town. That is an actual fact. I grew up in the hamlet of Osable Forks. It's a small town, and there wasn't a lot of kids. So there wasn't, especially not a lot of kids like me. And I got into punk rock because of being inspired by the bands I was listening to. Anything that seemed remotely alternative on MTV. I was a big fan of MTV's 120 Minutes, and I got really into 120 Minutes, I would say, about the time that I was listening to punk rock, because they would play cult classics, as they call them. I believe that's what they call them on 120 Minutes. I should really look this up, but I'm trying to rely on my memory for this. Please correct me if I'm wrong. They would play cult classics, and in those cult classics, they would sometimes play like the Sex Pistols or Public Image Limited, which were my two favorite punk rock bands as a teenager. But there were some female voices that kind of broke through the punk rock noise for me in random ways. And I don't know if I appreciated their punk rock role model, like figure for me as a teen, but I definitely, reflecting on it now as an adult, 30 years later, I'm very pleased that there were the female punk rock role models that I did have. And I would say my very first female punk rock role model possibly would have been maybe the girl that you hear about in the song by the Dead Milkmen that kicked the show off, Punk Rock Girl. But I could go deeper, because I mean, that was just kind of a love song to a fictitious punk rock girl, and you kind of only sort of see her in profile and not really in depth, and all of the songs about her, and she does make appearances in the video. It really wasn't the essence of what punk rock, I guess, really ultimately became for me. But if I'm going to be honest and say my first experience with punk rock, I would say it has to be seeing the Plasmatics on TV when I was a little girl. My mother was a night owl, and she stayed up late. And because she stayed up late, she let me stay up late, because I've always been a child of the night. I've always been a night owl, and I've inherited that from her. And she would watch the Tom Schneider show. And I remember watching the Plasmatics on the Tom Schneider show with her. I don't remember very much in depth of the appearance. I've now since watched it on YouTube many times over the years, but what I remember from watching it in that moment was the energy of a woman in a bra destroying things on stage. And she had a really cool haircut. Now, I was still living in Peru at the time, so I would have been under the age of 4 when I would have watched this on TV. And my family also liked to watch things other than Saturday Night Live. My family was a big SCTV fan, which had musical guests. And we also watched a television show called Fridays, which had musical guests. And I believe I saw the Plasmatics on Fridays. I'm assuming I did, because we watched it every Friday. And I know the Plasmatics did play on that, but I don't have a really exact memory of it. But I could play a bunch of other Plasmatic songs, but I'd actually have to censor them, and I don't want to censor anything, because that wouldn't be very punk rock of me. But the other side of me on punk rock says do the right thing and be kind, and that's also follow the rules of the FCC. So I will be giving you some honorable mentions and some homework throughout the show, and I'll have some Plasmatic special mentions for you too coming up. But the song I'd like to choose tonight to kick off the show of this Women in Punk Rock, or maybe we should just rebrand it to Amanda's Punk Rock and Alternative Journey through female artists over the years, from the ages of 14 until maybe 20, maybe would be more appropriate. But it's going to be a bunch of different female musicians and singers and all kinds of stuff that inspired me to become the punk rocker that I still believe I am today, 30 years later. So we are going to kick off with a tune by Wendy Williams on her own. Play it, and I'm going to come back and I'll tell you why it's special to me. To kick things off tonight, here's Reform School Girls, Wendy Williams, on Me and You and Music. I'm very grateful my parents decided to get cable TV in the mid-'80s. I think we got it in 85 or 86. Because up to that point, we were kind of at the mercy of whatever we could pull in with our antenna, because we'd moved from Peru to Osceola Forks at that point, and we didn't get TV in very well where we were located. And when we got cable, that meant there was more options to watch cool music-related stuff. Up to that point, I was watching, as I'd mentioned, Fridays, Saturday Night Live. We watched Midnight Special, Friday Night Videos. All of these things were things that I watched up to that point. But when we got cable, there was the USA Network, and they played some pretty neat things like Night Flight and Radio 1990 and Up All Night. Oh, goodness. Things like that. These really neat now things I'm grateful for because it's molded me with my pop culture obsessions, but neat opportunities I never would have gotten because I didn't grow up in a big city where there was places where art house movies were screened, or there were bigger record stores that had this kind of access to this wonderful world of music and pop culture related things. It just wasn't a possibility for me. I was very grateful because television gave me an inside look at the things that I had kind of knew about musically, but didn't really know what it looked like. So I'm very, very cool. And MTV definitely molded who I was. But this is a long way of saying, why did I pick Reform School Girls? Because my mom let us stay up late on the weekends, even later probably than we should have. And my sister and I would watch Night Flight. And one of the movies I watched on Night Flight was Reform School Girls. And although I had seen Wendy O. Williams do her performance with the Plasmatics on the Tom Schneider Show, it was watching Reform School Girls and then watching the music videos often when it would pop up on late night TV with my sister. So it's a nice memory. Years later, my ex-fiance bought me a Plasmatic shirt, and I, for the life of me, cannot find it. It is somewhere in my music troves. It is A New Hope for the Wretched, but since this is about me and my punk rock history tonight, for those of you who are local and listening to the show, you might remember we had a department store of sorts called H&L Green, which is near where Cumberland 12 is now located. And it was a great store. I got so many cool things over there as a kid and, growing up as a teenager. And sometimes they would have cutout records. And I would always look through the records because I never knew what I was going to find. And I'm flipping through the records. And this is probably 9th grade for me at this point. So I'm just kind of getting into punk rock. Still really listening to Iron Maiden and into heavy metal, but kind of really wanted to get more into punk rock and didn't have a lot of money. So if I found something cool in the cutout bin, I would get it. It's kind of where I got a bootleg. I realized later it's a bootleg of an Alice Cooper album called the Freak Out album, which I believe is a bootleg, not a real album. But anyway, I digress. So I'm flipping through these records and I land upon something that is both horrifying and intriguing and just disturbing all at once. It's a Plasmatics record, which delights me because it is only like $5 and it's right here in the discount bin. It horrifies me because it's the Maggots album, which is a drawing of an earth being destroyed, eaten by, well, the thing I just said, I don't want to say the word again. They bother me quite a bit. So here I am torn with the disgust of that thing on the cover and the name of the album, but also wanting to buy a punk rock record. So I bought it. And because I didn't have a record player in my bedroom at that point, I taped it from record to tape on my sister's record player, and I was able to play it that way on my own. But the songs I would want to play from that tonight, I would have to edit heavily. And again, this show is about being punk rock, so there's no editing. But if you want to listen to Maggots the album, or Maggots the record, excuse me, that's your extra credit for the Plasmatics. The next exposure I would have had probably to a female punk rocker, but not really knowing it, would be Blondie. My mom really liked Blondie. She really loved the song Call Me from American Gigolo. And she liked Blondie, so but Blondie was never switched off the radio. And I got into this mood about Blondie when I started thinking about what could I get easy access to that would be kind of reasonably priced, that would be punk rock. And it's important to note that one of the biggest punk rock influences on me was a book called England's Dreaming by John Savage. By this point, I was in 10th grade, right in the thick of my punk rock obsession because of the Sex Pistols. And I ordered this book and I got it through the order. I forgot, maybe it was Walden Books in the mall, the new mall at that point. I can't remember which bookstore it was, but I got it ordered. And I read this book back to front several times. And I just ate it up because it was for my Sex Pistols obsession. But I learned so much about other punk rock bands. And they had a list, like a discography in the back of sort of saying like these are the ultimate of ultimate punk rock albums. So I went through and I put check marks by the things that I already had in my collection, kind of by mistake or chance, or had purchased, or things that I thought would be cool. And I would hunt the bargain bins and I would find cheap tapes, because I didn't have a CD player at that point, or records, and I would take things as I would go, and I would check them off. And if I had thought of it earlier, I would have taken a picture of the book. The book's falling apart, but you can see all my check marks in the back. And one of the check marks is by the cassette, The Best of Blondie, which is Blondie's greatest hits. And I wanted something that would be cool so I could get to know a lot more about Blondie on the cheap without having to buy singular Blondie albums. And I went to Kmart with my mom and my grandma and my sister and my nephew on one of our Sunday old mall trips. We'd go to the new mall too, but we would like to go to Kmart and get Little Caesars pizza. So we went to Kmart, and I don't know how I would have had, I don't know what, the birthday money or maybe it's Christmas money or whatever, and I bought Blondie's greatest hits. And I fell in love with all these other Blondie songs that were really way more punk rock. One of my favorite songs by her is Rip Her to Shreds, which later on I used in high school in my senior year. We did in my speech class, we had to do a talk show, and our talk show had a theme song for each character that came up. And I was kind of a bad you-know-what, and that was my character. I had a ponytail on the side, and I was wearing a color block jacket, and, I was like bicycle shorts with black tights under them and black kind of little beetle boots. And I was just tough, and my theme music was Rip Her to Shreds. There is a VHS of that, but the VHS got eaten, and if anyone knows who can fix VHS tapes, please let me know, because I'd love to see that now, 30 years later. But anyway, so the song, though, that I really liked on it didn't sound punk rock at all, but it sounded so dreamy and lovely, and I really just connected with it for some reason. And I picked my friend Jen up from work the other day, and I hope she's listening tonight because this is for her. And she said when she was getting in the car or leaving her work to get in the car that Blondie's Atomic was playing. And I said, I really love that song. And I said, do you think I should play it? Like, is it something that it would be good over the air? And she agreed that it would be. So, Jen, if you're listening tonight, here, this one is for you. I'm going to put it in the library. Atomic is just so pretty, and I like it. So here's Blondie, one of my very first punk rock icons. Atomic on Me and You and Music. One of my favorite party tricks, and I know I'm not alone in this party trick, it's just one of my favorites, is to rap along to Rapture, the whole Fab Five Freddy part. And my mom really liked that song too. So again, Blondie was always definitely on the stereo in our house. And my sister actually, now I come to think of this, my sister had a Blondie 45, and it could have been of Rapture actually, if I remember right. And I tried to help her as a little kid and take it off the turntable and accidentally snapped it in half. So we always joke that that's the reason why she destroyed my Hello, I Love You, backed with Love Street original Doors 45 years later. But she says she didn't break it, but I think she did. So after I buy my Blondie tape, I'm, still looking through the clearance bins, and I do spend a little bit extra money around this time, and I buy the Clash's Combat Rock. Not female punk rock, but definitely part of my punk rock trajectory. But I had a little bit of money left over around that time, and I didn't know what else to buy, so I bought an album because I'd read about this woman in the book. And she seemed pretty cool. She looked really cool, very punk rock, very haunting. And she just seemed really tough. And her story just seemed kind of really neat too. And she was on the list, and I found it in a nice price bin at Record Town. It was one of those cassettes that didn't have any artwork, but it had like a black plastic case. It wasn't a full clear case. It was a clear on the front of the case, and then, black plastic. Generally, I don't know if I have no proof that those were cheaper, but usually those were the nice price ones that I always picked out. They had they were not a full translucent case, and they had absolutely zero artwork on the J card. But anyway, so the album in question is Patti Smith's Horses. Now, I didn't know what to expect. I went kind of into it sight unseen. Like musically, I had no idea what to expect. I'd only really read about her and seen what she looked like. And it's important to note, too, throughout this time period, not only was I reading this punk rock book, but I was digging through my family's magazine hoard. And I say that with love because my family is a family of antique dealers and collectors. And sometimes you tend to hold on to magazines for that reason because they are collector's items, especially if there's something kind of unique. And we had a decent collection of old Rolling Stones and Cream magazines. So when I got into this whole new genre of music, I went back and looked for anything punk rock that I could find in both Cream and Rolling Stone. And I do remember looking at Cream as a kid, but not really understanding it. Not saying I really understood it much as a teenager. Probably it's still over my head as a 40-something, but definitely was an inspiration. But anyway, so Patti Smith, I had no idea what to expect. But I put it in my tape player and I listened to it. And the first song out of the gate just went, poof. And I could do a whole show on the Horses album, and that would be great, but there's not enough time because it's a very long album. But the first song is Gloria in Excelsis Deo, and it's not the Gloria that you would have known if you had to sing it in choir. It's definitely a bit something I probably would have to, again, I'd have to censor. The other song that really blew me away is the song Land, Horses, Land of a Thousand Dances, La Merde, and it's a beautiful song. It's a very harsh song. It deals with some topics that I'm not going to talk about on this show tonight. We've talked about them before, but it's definitely listen with discretion. And if you are sensitive to things, it could be triggering to some listeners in the audience. So please take that as your warning if you decide to use that as your extra credit in your homework. The two songs that I really, really like on the album, I'm going to pick one of the two to play tonight. I really like the song Free Money, just because I like how staccato and fun it is. But there's a song that for some reason it still just touches me the same way it did as a teenager. It makes me feel that teenage like angst and longing and just feeling. Here we come 30 years later, and I love it. So here from the album Horses is Break It Up, Patti Smith, on Me and You and Music. As I worked my way through the back of this book and all the other resources I was trying to mine for anything that seemed remotely punk rock, I got involved with some mail order stuff. There used to be a thing you could write away and you could get photographs of your favorite musicians, and they were often blurry, very small. I can't even remember the dimension, like kind of like the size of a picture used to be when you'd have a 110 camera back in the 80s, one of those size pictures. And there were, some of them color and black and white and blown up and just awful, some of them, but you could write away for these. And I wrote away and got some Sid Vicious in concert pictures in color, bloody nose and all. And I found this through the back of Sassy Magazine, I believe. Now, Sassy Magazine was a huge thing for me because that was, in addition to having MTV showing me what was cool in punk rock and alternative through 120 Minutes and things like that, Sassy Magazine had a subscription, and that was cool because that was alternative fashion and teen things in the 90s, and it was just a really awesome resource. And I'm very grateful that I had that resource because it would also talk about music and up-and-coming performers and things like that. So it was a good resource, and I was a lot of things in the back where you could write away for free catalogs or things like that. And I actually got on the Toad the Wet Sprocket mailing list because of the back of the Sassy Magazine ads. And I also found an amazing independent record label, Project Records, and the name of the main performer was Black Tape for a Blue Girl, the project of a man named Sam Rosenthal. One half of it was a sampler of his music on the B-side, and the A-side was the various artists that he had signed. You sent away with a $5 money order, or if you're brave, $5 in cash, I suppose. And I believe I sent it in cash, maybe a money order. And, weeks later, you got the cassette sampler, and it was like all this wonderful, weird gothic music. And I think that's why punk rock and goth and alternative are all kind of the same music for me. Even the metal that I listened to back then, it's all the same because it was just how I was experiencing something that wasn't what was on the radio and what was considered normal, I guess, for the mainstream pop culture of the time when I grew up. And there were pockets of kids like me all over the country and in the world. And now through the internet, I found a lot of them. So it's kind of nice to talk about to other kids that say, oh yeah, I stayed up late watching Headbangers Ball, or I stayed up late watching 120 Minutes, people that didn't go to school anywhere near me on the other side of the country, even having these similar experiences, So no matter how alone I felt as a teenager, as a teenage punk rocker, growing up, I've found that there's pockets of kids that were also lonely punk rockers. Well, now we're just old punk rockers, and we found each other, and we're not alone anymore. And that is the beauty of punk rock, and that's the beauty of friendship that you meet through punk rock. I know other bands other genres of music, there's that same kind of camaraderie and friendship, but punk rock taught me a lot about community and friendship. And going back to mail order, I don't remember exactly how I found this mail order company. It was probably through Sassy Magazine. But you could right away and get a catalog, and they said that they had videos and all kinds of stuff, and they sold skateboard stuff, and the name of the company was Sessions. And I mail ordered a VHS of Winterland, which was the Sex Pistols' last concert. And I ordered that, and it didn't come, and it didn't come, and it didn't come. And honestly, I don't know if I really just was impatient or what it was, but I just got impatient. And maybe it took too long, I don't know, but it was fate's way of telling me at 15 to call the line and complain, the customer service line at 15 on the East Coast, in California, mind you, is where this company is, and not realizing the time difference. So this poor dude calls me back, and he is the guy on the customer service line, and his name is John, and we get to talking, strike a conversation, and find out that we have a lot in common. But he is older than me and wants to pick at me like I'm a little sister, and it was great because he was kind of like this older punk rock brother that I didn't know I needed on the other side of the country. And to be completely honest, he and I have never met face to face, but he's one of my oldest friends. And through the beauty of the internet, I have the ability to keep in touch with his life. He's just a Facebook message away. And to be fair, I have not messaged him in a long time. And John, if you're listening tonight, I really owe you a phone call or a message. I do. But we became pen pals, and he mailed me. Not only did I get my VHS very soon after I called and complained, but it was wrapped with a punk rock t-shirt. It was a Sid Vicious t-shirt that I still have to this day, and some stickers, some Green Day, and there was a Green Day sticker in there, and there was like, I think it may have been like, I can't even remember the others, all these great stickers. There was a Sub Pop sticker in there, and there was a Polvo cassette, which I still treasure that album to this day, and a magazine called Flipside and a magazine called Maximum Rock and Roll. And that took me to a different level of punk rock, and I was able to do more punk rock things because there was, in the back of especially Maximum Rock and Roll, a place where you could write away, you could write for pen pals. So punk rock pen pals your age too, And I had two pen pals. I had Vinny and I had Dave. He would write me, sign his letters D-D-A-V-E. And Dave lived in Pennsylvania and Vinny lived in Florida. And we wrote letters back and forth for a little while, and I lost touch with both of them, and I hope that they're both out in the world still being awesome punk rockers and just still being the kind, cool dudes that they were in the years that we wrote back and forth. Now, this is all a very long way to get to the next song. When I got the VHS of Winterland, attached to the end of it was a sampler. Now, the video was sent through a company called Target Video. And Target Video, I don't know too much about. I could do more research. But from what I understand, it was this guy named Joe that did all of these amazing videos of punk rock bands over the years. And he would make video samplers. And it just happened to be that the Winterland concert had one of these Target Video samplers on the end of it. And it had bands like Flipper and Tuxedo Moon, which is a band I actually got into years later, and The Weirdos, which I like, and a female-fronted punk band that just blew me away. And I just only knew this little snippet of the song for years, and it would drive me crazy. And I remember the name of the band, but I never could hear the song because, mind you, this is the 90s, and there wasn't a way for me to just go grab that song. And I didn't even think about trying to ever find it in a record store. And where would I find it? In Plattsburgh, New York, right? So years later, in the advent of getting things off the internet with services, I decided to type in Bush Tetras, Too Many Creeps, to see if I could find this elusive song that was stuck in my head. And put in Tuxedo Moon, too, because it's another song that haunted me from this Target Video cassette. I think I ended up spending more time watching this video sampler after a while than I did watching the Sex Pistols video, because it was, again, different exposure to punk rock music I had not seen before. And I was able to listen to this whole song, and probably one of the first videos I even looked up on YouTube when that became a thing was the Bush Tetris video in full, so I could watch the whole performance. So what I want to play for you tonight is that actual performance from the Target video that I had as a teenager. Here is Bush Tetris, Too Many Creeps, on Me and You and Music. Do I have better versions of that song? Of course I do. But that is just the epitome of punk rock. Like, it sounds so hollow because it was recorded live in 1980 in New York City, and they're all like sweaty in punk rock, and it was a female singing and playing bass, and it was so cool to see a female punk rocker. And then I started thinking about other female punk rocker bands when I was growing up. I said, hey, there's some bands that my sister listened to. One in particular that was particularly punk rock, and I guess I didn't think of it until I read my big book of punk rock. And that band is the Waitresses. Now, the Waitresses were a mixed band. They had men and women, and it's a pretty large band, too. The lead singer is a female, and the bass player, after 1982, was a female, and that was probably the most famous lineup. And my sister had a K-Tel record that had I Know What Boys Like, and I absolutely loved that song growing up. I thought it was the cutest. But we also watched a TV show called Square Pegs, and the Waitresses do the theme song for that. And when you think about being punk rock, you don't really fit in, so you have to feel like you have to be different, and you find a subculture of people who are like you but also different. And that's one of the many reasons why punk rock is important to me even to this day, to know that even if you're a misfit, there is a group of people who will love you for who you are, and the common denominator of that love is community and music, and that's why I love punk rock. So I want to place the theme song to Square Pegs, because I haven't played it in a while, and it's cute. The song I would say for your homework is No Guilt. It's a song by the Waitresses I kind of forgot about and rediscovered again a couple of years ago. It's about life after a breakup, so that's your homework if you want extra credit. But right now we're going to hear Square Pegs, the Waitresses, on Me and You and Music. Before we close tonight's show, some of the honorable mentions that I would give you as homework would be to listen to PJ Harvey. I got into her a little bit later on in my punk rock journey. Her album, Rid of Me, would be the album I would think that you should listen to. Also, I was able to buy the original B-52s album when I was probably like 15 at a rummage sale in Wilmington. Only kind of knew Love Shack because that was popular, and then I didn't really know anything else, but listening to the first album blew me away, and the homework off that would be Dance This Mess Around, if nothing else, just to hear the Limburger line. And I would say thanks to Romeo Void. They were another big influence on me. Susie and the Banshees, Kate Bush, not necessarily punk rock, but different in the whole music, the way she did things in her performance art. So definitely alternative, big fan and big inspiration. And I would add L7 because they came sort of during my metal mid 90s phase, and Tori Amos because she definitely would be in the same genre and era as PJ Harvey, and her songs, although they sometimes to an outsider would sound like maybe annoyingly pretty piano music, her lyrics are certainly very punk rock. I end tonight's show with a performer who I'd only read about in my big book of punk rock. It wasn't until years later, when I was about 19, I got my first BMG and Columbia House orders, and I ordered a punk rock compilation that had Blondie on it, and it had, oh goodness, a band whose name I don't think I can say on the radio, and it's Susie and the Banshees, and it also had this performer. And I always wanted to hear what she sounded like because she sounded pretty cool when I read about her. So we're going to end tonight with Polystyrene and her band X-Ray Specs. Thank goodness for female punk rockers. Thank you for making it to the epilogue. While digging through my archives, hoarded stuff, I found a tape that used to record the incoming messages on our family answering machine with the word mom scrolled in my terrible teenage handwriting. It is a treasure trove of nostalgia, capturing the voices of me and my friends as teenagers, as well as the voices of long-lost loved ones, including the voice of my late mother. But captured on this tape was one very important conversation. The very first time my friend John from Sessions called me about my late order. I can't believe how amazing it is to have captured the moment we became friends and to have it on tape after all these years, forgotten and yet showing up at the perfect time. I apologize for the quality. As seen from this photo, I had to do things the old-fashioned way when my cassette digitizer decided to no longer be compatible with my computer. Here's me and John in the beginning of our over 30-year friendship. Although we've never met in person, I sure hope to change that someday. As John said in an email to me after I shared this clip with him, how crazy to hear our baby voices.
John calling from Sessions returning.
Okay, I'm here. I'm here. I ordered this.
Screen the calls.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
What?
Someone's after you?
What?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. I see. Oh, I see.
The video took a while to get an order out because we were so busy. It is on order. I spoke with the buyer, and it should be here any day. It could come today, but the shipment hasn't come from you.
I still consider myself a punk rocker at nearly 47, and I hope to be one for the rest of my life. The way the ethos of punk rock shaped my personality is unmistaken. From my belief in the importance of community, doing it yourself, and standing up against the man, it all started with my getting into punk rock as a kid. Like my dear friend Nicole wrote on an envelope when she mailed me some Tiger Balm patches for all my aches and pains. We're still punk. Our patches just look different now. Ain't that the truth? And for all the aging punkers who have found themselves sober like myself and wanting to explore the more spiritual side of things, I've once again finally picked up the book I Want to Be Well, How a Punk Found Peace and You Can Too by Miguel Chen with Rod Mead Speary. It's really good. A big thank you to our theme's composer, Tim Collins. Until we meet again, have a safe and happy day.